your view sitting on your back deck, right? So we figured that where the star is probably about the best place, if that option is chosen. Again, that's it from our GIS mapping system, so you're a little clearer on what you're looking at. So that's an aerial view. Where the star is would be that preferred location. Recommended option scenario 2, which has the best cost benefit option, as it offers the lowest capital cost of all the options we looked at for all of the options that, or all of the value that you're going to get out of it. So this scenario includes the installation of the fire pump, water distribution system upgrades, and the additional ground level storage tank down near right at the water plant, the existing water plant. So this is the one that we recommended to the township and recommended you all look at. I think we think it gives you the best bang for your buck, if you will. That's going to give you 1,500 gallons a minute, which is more than what is the minimum that the NFPA requires at 1,000, but not the 2250, which would be the optimal amount, but you really don't need that much. So under the scenario, the ground level storage tank would be down to the water plant. Any questions?
So all of these scenarios, I'm seeing a common theme, we need more water.
Absolutely.
So in the previous meeting, we talked about some of these new developments and all the testing that they need to do when they're going to draw water and how much water. Is any of that testing going to be done for the additional draw of water to the surrounding homes in the area? Because this is going to draw in more water. Is it going to take it from other wells in the area?
Please.
In response to that, there wouldn't be more water pumped, it would be just more storage capacity for the water.
Okay, thank
So
you.
it wouldn't have to increase wells or add wells or any of that.
Thank you.
Isn't there
We're
a time
using the
to
same
fill that?
wells and the well pumps that are existing today. It's just going to be stored a little bit differently than what it currently is.
So if there was an emergency, you might drain that tank down and it may take some time as you're pumping to fill that back up. But during that time, you'd still have sufficient volumes for all of the needs in the development, but you wouldn't be adding wells or changing any of that.
Right.
But you have to fill those tanks.
Correct.
Yep.
So how do you fill those tanks?
They would just be filled at the pumping rates capable, that the wells are capable of.
And by filling those tanks, are you still not having the same effect of drawing water maybe over a longer period of time? Yes, you'll have some backfill come into there, but is it not the same effect?
When you're initially filling them, you're going to be pumping the wells longer, but then after that, then it's going to be just the normal usage.
Yep.
And if there was an emergency
Still, if you're pumping those pumps longer, you're still going to be draining.
Right,
No,
but that's
it's
only for a
going to
short
be the
period.
same amount that you're currently using. We're really not changing anything.
It's a
Only when you
one-time
first
fill.
fill the
Right.
system are you going to have some
And
extra pumping.
So it's a one-time fill effect to actually
Correct.
get
Pretty
it
much,
filled?
yes.
Because I think I read in the report, it's almost 48,000 gallons a day is the daily draw
Yes.
in that
40,
development.
it's a little
Yes.
over 47,000 gallons,
47,
yes
I
ma'am.
think it was, yeah.
Yep.
So how long would it take to fill that tank to get it to the one-time fill? And
Well,
then
your
be
wells
just doing the
pump,
normal
it
draw?
depends on which option you do, but the well's pumping about 250 gallons a minute max. So we didn't extrapolate that out, but it would be, 100,000 gallons at 250 gallons a minute, talking a few
So
hours.
there could be an effect to surrounding wells
Only-
during the fill time?
Yeah, but only very short term, and there are no other surrounding wells very close to the two pumping wells that are used by Burke Crossing.
Correct.
But as mentioned earlier, with the shell and stuff, doesn't take water to permeate down through to refill the aquifer that's been drained?
The aquifer itself, basically, you've got recharge, and the water you're taking out to fill those tanks, if you put a pressure transducer in the wells and looked at that, it would be back to normal levels within a few hours after you shut the pumps off or you had filled the tanks.
So it seems like you're trying to retrofit a solution to a problem that should have been solved upstream.
Yeah.
No
Well,
pun intended, no pun intended.
the issue was.
So in your expert opinion, sorry, but in your expert opinion, what could have been done to prevent this to begin with, in the planning phase? Because, we've all heard an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Absolutely, and it depends on what standards that were existing at the time when it was constructed. I don't even know
94, 95.
90s.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what the NFPA codes were then, but it may have been met the minimum standards at that point in time. That's something we didn't delve back into, but I would imagine that when it was designed originally, it met the current standards and codes.
And sorry for the obvious, paper question. How long ago was this addition built?
It was started in the early 90s.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
91.
My name is Mark Webb, I live in Perkiola Crossing. Debbie was the second settlement in Perkiola Crossing. When this was built, this was the township's first high-density development of the water plant. This was the first water plant. So they were kind of feeling their way through. The water plant was supposed to be built at the top of the hill, not at the bottom of the hill, which is where it is right now. There's two wellheads in off of Glenwood Avenue at this point in time, correct?
Yeah, one's up Glenwood, one's down right by the water storage.
Yep.
Okay. So when everything started, the first builder was Gita, and they had 247 homes, and we were golden, no issues. Then Frederick came in and they added their homes, and the last builder was Ryan, and that's when we started running into the pressure and capacity issues.
And when were
What
they
was
built?
that?
That
That was
was,
a little later in the 90s.
yeah, that
The
was,
last one, Glenwood was the last.
when was the last one?
That's the upper end, right?
No, right
No,
down the middle, right where well
Right in the
too.
middle.
Oh, okay.
Where the well is.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's when the fire company got involved and started doing the surrounding fire companies and working with them to do tanks, and they would have regular practice runs on that to get stuff done, because they knew, and we knew, the fire hydrants couldn't
Sustain the water.
sustain this. Now, the issue with what we had is we have 330 residents that financially take care of this water plant. We had a tank float back in the early years that cost a lot of money that we absorbed in our bills.
That's in the wastewater.
That's on the wastewater.
Yeah,
system,
it's still something we have to do.
Yeah.
And as we've gone through, there's been a lot of questions and solutions. So now we're in the midst of looking for solutions based on recent events that have happened.
So just to make sure, to summarize, basically, everything was good when the initial development was built. As you added more, we were
Yep.
looking at growth, then demands got higher. Probably still using the old codes that were there in place at the time that
Absolutely.
didn't meet modern standards.
Absolutely correct. And again, the township was brand new at this. We didn't know, I say we as a township didn't know what we didn't know.
Sure.
Because we were surrounded by farms at the time. And the technologies was not 1990s, 2000 technologies. It was a little bit older.
Correct.
So the guys and gals were down there with the knobs and wheels and, Mr. Wizard behind the curtain.
Stopwatches.
And they've done a wonderful job. But it's time to make some adjustments now.
And
It's
hopefully
very-
we'll
it's very
have
limited.
today for tomorrow.
Yeah.
For my 8-year-old daughter to have a good place to live, clean drinking water.
Right.
We're going to have a lot more expansion.
And one of the
From
things
these lessons
also,
being learned now, have to retrofit and put a Band-Aid on something. It's not a Band-Aid, I'm sure it's not a good solution, no offense.
and as you
But
said,
we're
it was,
having to do something now that we need to think about, planning ahead. And I'm sure it was done at the time,
Yeah.
with the modern technology, with the top technology at the time. And with the technology we have today, and with more knowledge that the township has gained from these experiences, and hopefully learning from this experience as well.
and that's one of the things it is, that was quite a learning experience. First of all, none of the board, none of the township staff, nobody that's here now
Right.
was involved when that was approved. And like I said, it was approved in that time frame then. It's easy to look back now and say, wow, we should have.
Money,
But then
money, money.
you also, you look at the thing, I think, thank the local fire department, because chief, if I was wrong, but I believe the last fire there was put out with about 250 gallons of water. Because if you're putting 100,000 gallons of water on the place, we're doing more damage with the water than we're doing with the fire. So the objective is to use as little bit as possible, but you want to have that capacity to make
Take away
sure.
the heat, that's what the water's doing, is take away the heat.
Right. And that's why the
Bus and
lessons,
oxygen.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And I was just saying, that's why the lessons learned there are being used for all the other things, the other proposed development. If we were looking at this back then or approving it, that water tank would be at the top of the hill. It would not be at the bottom of the hill, because there's a 100-foot head difference, vertical head difference.
So let's jump forwards now, all right? You have all these lessons learned, all right? And we hope to grow off of our past mistakes, right? Maybe not mistakes, in hindsight, mistakes. So what are we talked about in the ordinances earlier, of trying to prevent this. Are we planning to look ahead future problems like this now with the experience? Or-
Absolutely, and that's why the developments, if a development does occur down the road, it's not gonna have a water tank at the bottom of the hill. That's the
I'm
first
on
thing.
top of the hill.
And it's gonna be at the proper place, there's gonna be a proper amount of space for the wastewater treatment plant, it's not gonna be shoehorned in, and it's gonna have all of those features that it needs for future protection and possible expansion or improvement if it becomes necessary.
And I'm just a guy, but I will tell you now that we have a lot more resources available and expertise available than we did back then.
No, understood, and
And so your question's a great question, and we're not experts, but we can surround ourselves with experts to help going forward.
I might be able to help.
then
Carl.
if there's not experts, then why, and sorry to bring it up, y'all already proved and stuff, but why would the board of supervisors want to take away and put enhancements if they're not experts?
Because of working with experts, that's what that was
Okay,
about.
okay.
A great question, really.
So
I'm sorry.
basically, I'm Pat Corcoran, by the way, I'm the fire chief,
Hi.
the fire marshal. Basically, Perky Open Crossing, the standards, and when he was talking, he wasn't speaking of county ordinances or township ordinances. What he was talking about was the NFPA standard, and that's the National Fire Protection Agency. They changed the standards in 2001 for conjoined townhomes. Minimum of 1,000 gallons per minute. We at the fire department knew we couldn't get 1,000 gallons per minute out of Perky Open Crossing, not even close. So the way we're set up is we have tankers come in. Montgomery County has a tanker strike force as well. And that's what we did at the big fire in Perky Open Crossing, the first one on Pine Ridge. Tankers came in, we established a water supply, we never ran out of water. And we were flowing 1,250 gallons per minute through the duration of that fire with outside water, not with any water coming out of the hydrants. The last fire in Perky Open Crossing was basically a room and contents. We put that out with under 300 gallons of water. Okay? So we have contingency to keep everybody safe. That last fire, we caught it, we stopped it from taking up the whole row because we got water as soon as we were called. The problem was we weren't called to that fire until 3 of them were on fire already and they were 30 feet above because I live in the development. And one of my kids came running in and told me there's a fire. And I went out, I called county on my radio and they were just dispatching it at that point. It was too far gone at that point. I don't know why it wasn't called in earlier, I can't say that. But that fire we put out, we ran 1,250 gallons per minute consistently in that fire through 2 ladders and hand lines. So we have the contingency in place. But I would like to see this happen because we could, if we had hydrants, I would like to see them as close to 1,500 as I can. Because this changed in '01, it could change again in 5 or 10 years.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Which is why we.
And then we're behind the 8 ball in 5 years after doing all this. I'd rather go right up to the 1,500 if you guys decide to do this, the township or whoever decides to do this. The fire company has no say in what they do with the hydrants at Perky Open Crossing. We just use them.
We mentioned the NFPA code, and in that code, it talks about annual flow testing, not flush testing. So isn't this flow testing that he now did part of the study something that we should have been doing on an annual basis for these hydrants?
I don't know, because the fire company has no control over those. That's all to the township and whoever they designate it to.
Wouldn't that follow NFPA though, if they were doing annual testing of these hydrants?
If that's
Flow
what NFPA
testing?
says, yeah.
Is the language, is that what the language is? I don't mean to ask
No,
the
that's
question,
okay.
I don't think
I
that.
don't know. Sorry.
Right, if that's what they require, that's what's gonna have to be done.
So NFPA 25, fire hydrant must be inspected annually and after each operation. The flow must be tested each year and maintenance must be performed annually as well.
That's for fire hydrants that are usable.
So did we ever deem these
No.
unusable?
Yep, they used to have signs on them. When I first moved in 2000, they all had signs on them said, do not use for fire fighting.
So
What happened to those
are the
signs?
residents aware of
I think
that?
blew
Like,
away,
did
I guess, or
fire
fall off or
Wouldn't
broke
somebody be
off.
responsible for, because I mean, I've talked to residents in there and many of them had no idea.
Yeah, see, I was told at my closing, because my insurance company knew it somehow, that
Right, and
they weren't available. I'll let you get back. I don't want to take up too much.
That's quite all right.
Now, just to follow my question real quick, with these storage tanks, is there excess on the wellheads that we need to upgrade the wellheads? Is there going to be excess on the generators if we're out of power during a storm? Have we thought about those things with the excess?
We would have to look at that, all those things, like especially generator at design phase. So these are just hydrant study and the results from the hydraulic study that we did. So what we're doing is making recommendations. Those things would have to be addressed during the design. But yes, they need to be looked at in your generator specifically because it needs to have the capacity of being able to run the fire pump. Or you could go with a diesel motor-driven fire pump. There are options there. Again, this is all data that we put together and the scenarios that you would need to reach these flows. So this is by no means a design, okay?
I appreciate your time, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Who's responsible to make sure when the codes are being updated and changed that something like this doesn't happen? Because if the codes were changed in 2001, who was notified? Hey, you might have an issue because you're not meeting the requirements.
That would be up to the township, the governing body.
When they change the NFPA, they don't mandate, you can't go back and retroactively change everything to come up to that. The code requires that anything built from that point has to meet the new standard.
Correct.
So
So
in the
any
previous,
existing grandfather.
Correct.
Yes, any existing system is grandfathered until there's any work done. So if any work is done, it's up to the Board of Supervisors to make sure that all applicable codes are followed.
so in
Your code
the,
enforcement.
That's not a mandatory requirement, though, or is it? Sorry, I don't know.
What do you say mandatory?
Well, if you say that if there's work being done,
Well, yeah, if there's any work being upgrades to the system, like if they build a new storage tank or drill a new well or making a major addition to the existing system, then yes, it could apply. It depends on,
could apply, but doesn't have to be applied.
it depends on how it's written
And how significant the change
and
is.
how significant the upgrades are. So there's a lot of things that go on with that. I mean, that's all case by case
You're
basis.
painting the fire hydrants, no need to do it, right? But if you're
Correct.
putting in 20 more, then you probably need to.
Yeah, if you're adding 400 more housing units to this development, then yes, you're gonna have to do major upgrades, and everything would have to come to the current code.
And remember, NFPA is a guideline, it's not,
That is true.
yes.
They are recommended guidelines from and that's a federal entity.
yes.
That is nationwide.
And who makes the decisions to implement
In
it?
the,
City council? Board of supervisors, who makes the decisions to implement it?
That would be the Board of Supervisors in this case.
so
Does
in the,
the Basin Commission have any insight, any input into that?
Which commission?
The Delaware Basin,
No, Delaware River Basin Commission only tells you how much water you can take out of the ground.
On a
so we have
specific
Board of
well.
Supervisors to determine that, whether it needs to be done, the guidelines actually follow. Is that correct?
As far as it's the governing body's responsibility.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
point. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
so in the previous meeting, there was a builder here that was asking about alternate options, and one being tapping into the existing system at Ivy Ridge. So are you basically saying that if he were to tap into that system, he would not be held to any of the higher standards now for that system? He would be grandfathered on all of the old standards, and we could potentially have another situation like this in that area?
No, what he's saying was the one property that's part of the Ivy Ridge development that was factored in at the beginning,
Okay,
the water system, the sewer system were built with the capacity for that.
okay,
So if they build the structures there that were planned way back when the development started, that it just hasn't occurred, then they're good. If somebody wants to add on to that system, then they have to have the capacity to handle that. What he was saying about with the letter of intent, essentially, if there was a water system that was running a line down the neighboring township, and they wanted to build something in this township, then he could get a letter from them saying that they were willing to serve it. But under the ordinance that was discussed, the Board of Supervisors would have the right to approve or deny that, because it's important for the township to have control over what water options are utilized in the township.
Okay, so it was already planned for that water to come for that piece
For
of the
that one,
development?
the one structure, the one parcel that he's talking about.
Right, so will it still undergo some sort of testing to make sure that system can still handle that extra?
Well, the system was designed for that
Correct.
parcel.
This
Um,
was
But,
designed
and
to
the
handle these
township does
hydrants.
not control the water system at Ivy Ridge.
Can we,
Okay,
Yeah,
can we
sorry.
hold some of the questions until we can get through?
Sure. So cost options. This is the fun part. So for fire pump, scenario one, fire pump, no distribution system upgrades, and so it'd be building the minimum size tank and 1,000 gallon fire pump capacity would be about $615,000, almost $616,000 to do that. To add a fire pump that is capable of doing 1,500 gallons a minute, you're looking a little closer to 700,000, so 700,000, 688, 875. And to meet the 2,250, it would be a little over $800,000. Just for the fire pumps in the tank down by the water treatment plant. Scenario two is doing the fire pump and distribution system upgrades. So to meet the 1,000 gallons a minute, you're looking at about a $1.3 million commitment, almost $1.4 million. To supply 1,500 gallons a minute, you're looking at $1,428,000, so about $1,430,000. To get to the 2,250 gallons per minute capacity, we're at about $1.6 million. To bid, that includes the 12-inch distribution system upgrades out and running up the center of the development. Scenario three is the elevated storage tank. This would, from an operational standpoint, would be the best option. It would be the easiest to operate and have the most efficient operation, but the cost is much higher, as you can see. For 1,500 gallons a minute, it would be a little over $2 million. To get to the 2,250 gallons a minute, you'd be a little over $3 million to be able to accomplish that. And these are cost estimates at this time. Those are not firm numbers. These are just preliminary, cursory numbers. So they could change once you start getting into the design phase and actually looking at things a little closer.
Dan, does this scenario include upgrades to the water main?
No, this was no system upgrade, so that is another option, which was a little bit more. For the 12-inch line, we estimated at $250 per foot, per linear foot, and you're looking at 2,300 foot. So there's a substantial amount of cost in doing that distribution main upgrade. Summary and conclusion. So currently you own and operate water system for Perkiomen Crossing, as we well know, and it does not have adequate storage. We've gone over all that. So our recommendation is to make the improvements to include the addition of a new ground storage tank, a fire flow pump,